Hello, welcome to another Ielts video. In this video, we're going to look at study strategies for all four sections of the exam, and we are going to look at case studies of students that have used these strategies to score bands as high as perfect band 9. If you find the video helpful, please visit the online forum ieltsnetwork.com, where you can interact with me and other IELTS students, and my blog ielts.com. On the screen you see a picture of Sun Tzu, who was a historical military general and is very famous for his wartime strategy. And one of his most famous lines is, "Every battle is won before it is ever fought." And we're going to apply this advice to certain sections of today's lesson. So the idea is that with extremely effective preparation, you can have extreme IELTS victory. Now let me show you exactly what I mean and where these strategies are coming from today. We are looking at case studies today. If you follow IELTScast, you will recognize the names. So over the past couple of months, I have had conversations with Vidit and conversations with Toby. And these two individuals are very remarkable cases. Vidit is from India. He scored an overall band 9. Yes, you heard that correctly. He scored band 9, which means he got 9 in listening, 9 in reading, 8.5 in writing, and 9 in speaking. He lived in Australia for 3 years before he had his IELTS success, and he was, I believe, predominantly in India before that. Toby, also another remarkable case from Uzbekistan, had an overall band of 8 on his very first try. So that's 8.5 in listening, 9 in reading, 6.5 in writing, and 8.5 in speaking. What is very unique about Toby's case is that Toby had never spoken to a native English speaker before he engaged his IELTS. And when I talked to him during the interview on IELTScast, he iterated that I was the second native English speaker he had ever spoken to. So as you can see, these two guys are very unique. Now, I think it's important that we recognize that there is a lot we can learn from these two individuals because they are model IELTS students. So the interesting thing I found in talking to both of them is that they both followed very similar strategies in their approach to preparing for the IELTS. I want to go over the strategies that they followed in detail in this lesson, and then at the end of the lesson I'm going to include the recorded interviews that I had. So let's start by looking at some of the general approaches that these guys took towards their preparation for IELTS. Now, both of them iterated to me that they made the English language personal. What this means is that they consumed subjects in English that they enjoyed. So instead of, sitting down to do their IELTS preparation and thinking, oh, this is horrible, I don't like this, and studying, it's just such a drag, they turned it into something fun. They found listenings, they found readings, they engaged the language in an enjoyable way, and this helped them to absorb the language faster. Both guys made sure that they were very aware of what could appear on the exam. So that it means a couple of different things. Firstly, they made sure that they were aware of what subjects can appear on the IELTS. Typically, you're going to have to talk about or read about something to do with education, with work, perhaps a specialized form of work, many different things, topics about weather. It really could be about anything at all. Transportation, health, science, cities, travel, all of these different things. So it's important that you become versed on a variety of subjects. The guys iterated a need to know recent questions and to be familiar with what sort of trends are going on in IELTS at the moment. Both of these guys iterated the need for routine. And so typically months, so for example, Toby in particular, he mentioned 2 months before his exam, he was following the following routine. And Vidit, I believe he iterated something similar. 2 hours a day of active listening. So what does active listening mean? This means that you are listening and you are focusing on what's being said, and you have a pen and paper in hand, you're noting new things that you're hearing. This is not the same thing as popping in your headphones and sitting on the bus and not, you're kind of listening, but you're not really, that's not really active listening. Sit, pen and paper in hand, listen, make notes about what you hear, new vocabulary, new phrases you don't understand, you look them up in the dictionary, look them up online, and this is not only just to hone your listening skill. This will also help you improve your speaking. It'll help you improve your writing. It'll help you improve all aspects of your English language. Every day you should be speaking actively for 1 hour. 1 hour of active reading every day. Now, as both guys iterated, they read things that they enjoyed. So they would find texts, in magazines, maybe National Geographic, maybe Popular Science, maybe these different magazines, and they would read actively, underlining new vocabulary they see, noting new vocabulary, making sure they note the spelling, all of this important stuff. Finally, both guys iterate the importance to have coached writing. So you must have feedback from someone who knows about the IELTS, who has a deep understanding of the IELTS. You must have them guide you, tell you what you need to do to improve. Now let's get to the specific sections of the exam and talk about the strategies that these gentlemen shared. Listening, as we pointed out earlier, listen actively. Take notes on speech and the language flow. Train for accents. Now, as you know, the IELTS is a test that is created and administered by bodies in both Australia and the UK. So you have to be familiar with those accents. British accent, and if we break that down further, so English accent, Scottish accent, Irish accent, Australian accent, New Zealand accent, and then you would also want to be familiar with some of the other Commonwealth countries, so South African accent, Canadian accent, Indian accent. Listen to conversations. You're going to be engaging a conversation with your IELTS examiner. You're going to be listening to conversations in the listening portion of the exam. It is very important that your skill to understand conversations is honed, is very sharp. Toby shares a great tip, and this is to take the audio out of movies. There are certain tools you can use online to do this. Take the audio out of movies, pop in your headphones, listen to movies that you like, and focus on the language. There are always conversations in movies, and these conversations will help to train your skill further. Now, as we were pointing out before, you might want to pick movies, not necessarily Hollywood movies, but perhaps English movies, Irish movies, Australian movies, help you train your listening for accents further. Now, let's go over some specific testing strategies that these guys shared, and I would like to amplify. Underline the keywords in the questions. Age-old strategy. I don't need to talk about this in more detail. Use the review time to preview the next section. This gives you an extra 30 seconds or 40 seconds in some cases. Check little errors at the end of the exam. So as you know, you're writing very quickly, you're getting down these answers, and sometimes you finish one section and you think, oh, I know I've made a spelling mistake. Let me go back and check it. No, don't do it now. Wait until you get to the end of the exam. You have lots of time at that point to transfer your answers to an answer sheet, and it's at that time that you'll be able to just focus on correcting those little errors, if it's spelling or grammar or whatever. Okay, now let's get back to Sun Tzu. So Sun Tzu tells us that every battle is won before it is ever fought. The listening and reading sections are areas where we can apply this strategy precisely. Engage practice tests until you consistently get your mark. Finally, this goes back to making it fun. Get into it. I think, as Toby says, get into it. Make your listening preparation fun. Listen to native English speakers talking about things that you enjoy. You will hear all of the colloquialisms you'll need for the exam. Listen to things that you enjoy. Reading. Okay, a couple things to remember about reading. The manner in which the academic exam is marked is slightly more lenient than the general. And Vidit shares the advice that you'll hear in a moment that if you're having trouble with reading, it might be an idea to engage the academic. Personally, I find the academic readings to be much more challenging than the general readings, but if you're scoring, band 7.5 consistently in general and you just can't get it to band 8, an idea might be to just, if you can, if it applies to your overall strategy for the Ielts, switch to the academic, see if you can get that band 8. Remember that the questions are sequential. So if you find the answer to number 1, the answer to number 2 is not going to appear before it in the text. True, false, not given. Not given is only used if 100% absent. Okay, so some students get confused between false and not given. False, there will be a clear piece of information that states to the opposite of whatever your question states. Testing strategies for reading. Let me highlight this. Now, this is a strategy that Vidit shared with me that I found very interesting. Do one question at a time. Let me highlight both of these. These work together. Do one question at a time. If your the first few questions are true, false, not given, you start at question 1. You do not read through all the questions. You read question 1 first, and then you go and find the answer. Then you read question 2, and then you go and find the answer. And then you read question 3, and then you go and find the answer. Do them one at a time. If the question is a headings match, sometimes you have to match headings to paragraphs within the reading. Vidit suggests to save this for the end. So this is the last thing that you should be doing, the last type of question that you should be doing in any reading section. Okay? Because the other sections will force you to go through the text. And after you do that, then you go back and you check for the headings. You already understand the text to a certain extent. And I want to add in here, do not read the text from start to finish. This is the advice that's coming from both Vidit and Toby. You don't read the text. You read the questions, you find the answers. That's it. Now, a strategy that Vidit followed, and I think that this is very effective for students that are very confident about their reading, is to find the answer in the text and then you write the question number next to the answer in the text. You don't write it in the blank, or you don't write it on your answer sheet. You just write the number next to the text. Okay? And then so I guess the point here is you get through the questions as quickly as you can. There's lots of time to go back and do all the technical stuff about writing the answers into your answer sheet. You're given time at the end to do this. So there's no need to spend time during your exam to do this. Finally, back to Sun Tzu, engage practice tests. You should know what band reading you are before you even get into your exam. Writing. Focus on quality before you focus on speed. So when you're training for your exam, if your writing is at a band 5.5 level and you need it to be at a band 6.5 level, don't worry about speed. Speed, you can spend 2 weeks worrying about speed, the 2 weeks before your exam. Worry about the quality. Get that to the level it needs to be at, no matter how long it takes you. If it takes you 3 hours to write that 6.5 essay, that's fine. You can work on shortening that later. But the key thing is that you have to be able to get your quality up first. Improving your speed will come. Learn essay structure. Absolutely vital. If you go into the exam not knowing how to write an essay, the chances of you performing well are extremely low. Read lots of example essays. Okay, and now again, I should put in here, actively read lots of example essays. What does actively read mean? It means that you're going to be noting various ways that the grammar is structured, various ways that the sentences link together. Note how the example is discussed, how a conclusion is drawn from that example. Read lots and lots and lots of essays. And I promise you that you will slowly start to emulate the quality of those essays. Get your writing assessed to ensure you know how to improve. Another key thing. Students can study for months and months by themselves, and it could be in vain because they may find out that they've been making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So don't let that happen. Get your writing assessed every now and then to make sure that you're improving. Speaking. Coherence trumps all. If you can speak coherently, this is a very, very key part of your speaking grade. The examiner wants to see that you can communicate a message. Even if your sentences are somewhat simple, if the message comes across clearly, you will score better than a student who is trying to use these long, complicated sentence structures, but is making the examiner strain to understand what they're saying. So speak coherently, focus on speaking clearly. Stay on topic. Use colloquialisms appropriately. Now again, this all ties back to all the listening you're going to be doing, to all of the reading you're going to be doing, but specifically the listening. If you listen to lots of conversations, you will hear people using colloquialisms, and then you will start to use these same colloquialisms. And the more listening you do, the more naturally you'll use these colloquialisms. So in a minute, you're going to hear Vidit and Toby speaking, and I want you to focus on how naturally they use English colloquialisms. They are able to use familiar language. It sounds as though they've grown up in an English-speaking country. Keep the conversation portions sounding like conversations. So this means that don't let things get too robotic in your conversation with your examiner. Now, obviously, to do that, you must prepare properly, and this means you must speak regularly. So that's why at the beginning of today's video, the strategy was to actively speak for an hour every day. So when you get into your exam, there is nothing foreign about that exam. Now, an interesting strategy that Toby shares is to practice speaking longer than 2 minutes. Practice monologues that go on for longer than 2 minutes. And an exercise that he had and used with his friends is something he calls marathon. So what this means is that they have a warm-up where, let me just clarify, it's him and a few of his friends. They choose a topic, and each person speaks about a topic for 1 minute. Okay, and then after that minute, they provide each other feedback. What sounded good, what didn't sound good, what was fluent, what wasn't fluent, what was coherent, what wasn't coherent, how could it be better? And then they choose different topics, and then they speak for 3 minutes about these topics. Different topics, they speak for 5 minutes, 7 minutes. I think Toby says in the interview that they go up to 10 minutes. So speaking by yourself on a topic for 10 minutes. If you train like this, when you get into the exam, your 2 minutes is going to be just that much easier. You can speak at length for 10 minutes. You know how to share examples, you know how to draw conclusions. Okay, another thing to remember is that you can score band 9 with an accent. So don't think that, don't give up or be discouraged or think that having a light accent is going to hold you back from 9. That's not the case at all. Everybody speaks with an accent. I speak with an accent. So a light accent is not a problem. The important thing is coherence trumps all. Okay. Now, as Vidit points out, living in an English-speaking country can make a difference. It allows you to obviously have more chance for interaction with English speakers. You're kind of getting trained all the time. So that can help if that option is available to you. Now let's go over some specific testing strategies. First testing strategy. Answer directly and summarize. If your examiner asks you a question, you must provide an answer. The summarized portion of this is sometimes if we are asked something and we're going to be a little bit longer winded about that, we need to sort of wrap up what we've said in a sentence or two at the end that clearly summarizes to the examiner what it is that we just said. We want to make sure that the examiner doesn't think that we've gone off on a tangent. Okay, so always bring your pieces of conversation back down to the central point. If the examiner asks you something like, tell me about your hometown. So you talk about your hometown, and then maybe you finish it with something like, those are the specific things that I feel most accurately describe my hometown. So in doing this, you've brought it back and you've made it clear to the examiner that you are focused on what they're asking. Use transitions when needed. Overuse can sound robotic. Toby shares this tip. Excellent tip. Transitions are important, transitioning from one sentence to another. But if every second sentence you're saying, on the other hand, however, for this reason, sometimes it can sound a little bit robotic. So again, if we were to go back to the exercises we're doing in active listening, we will know when transitions are needed, when they're being overused. We will know because we've listened to enough English conversation that it will become more and more natural for us. Okay, let's talk about some strategies that are specific for part 2. The first strategy is to note keywords on your cue card. This will help you to answer directly, like we pointed out up here. Anyway, I'm sure everybody knows that strategy already. Make up something if you don't know. Your examiner is not really concerned with how truthful you're being, to be honest with you. So it's okay to make up something. As you prepare for your monologue during that 1 minute, just write the keywords that you need. You're not writing sentences. You may want to write a small phrase, that's fine, but just the keywords, just the basic things. Write down keywords that you want to use in your response, and this will help strengthen your response significantly. Okay, I hope that little bit was helpful. I want to play the 2 interviews for you so that you can hear both Vidit and Toby tell about their experiences in their own words. And I think that their advice is amazingly helpful. I hope you will listen with a pen and paper in hand, take notes. We'll listen to Vidit's interview first. And the interesting thing about Vidit and Toby is that Toby listened to Vidit's interview with me, and then Toby applied certain strategies to his exam, and then he ended up scoring band 8. Okay, so the strategies work. Listen carefully, put them into use, and I hope to hear of your success and interview you at some point too. Ielts Cast, Episode 10. Hi, welcome to Ielts Cast, everyone. I just wanted to share some news with you before I play this interview with Vidit. After the interview, this was a few weeks after, Vidit sent me an email and shared some news from his side that I think you will find very interesting. So in the interview, Vidit tells us that he scored 6.5 in the writing section of the exam, and then on a subsequent exam, he scored 7.5. And Vidit told me in his email that he did not feel comfortable with the 7.5 that he scored, and he actually went back and challenged the mark. As you know, you can challenge the marks that you receive in the IELTS examination. And you're not going to believe what happened. He challenged the mark, and his mark was bumped up by an entire band. It was bumped up to 8.5. So if you think that you did better than the score that you received, don't be shy. If you really, really feel that, if you've been practicing and getting feedback from IELTS instructors and they're telling you that you're a band 7 or a band 8 student and you receive a score that's not what you think you deserve, don't be shy. Go back and challenge it. It could make a difference. Okay, here's the interview. Enjoy.
You're listening to Ielts Cast, the podcast that puts you in touch with successful IELTS candidates from around the world. Listen and learn as they explain how they achieved band 7, 8 and even 9. Now, here's your host, Ryan.
Hello and welcome to Ielts Cast. My name is Ryan, and today I'm talking to Vidit, an Ielts student from India who's currently living in Australia. Nice to meet you, Vidit.
Nice to meet you too, Ryan.
Vidit, you've scored a band 9 in speaking, listening, and reading, which is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And we were just talking a moment ago, and you were telling me about you were saying that you had taken the exam a few times. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I actually did because my goal was to get about 8 bands in all of them. And how it worked out for me is I always got above 8 in the 3 sections.
Okay.
But with writing, I was having a problem because I was getting a 7.5 every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I still haven't gotten to my 8 bands yet. So I'm still working on that. But other than that, to be honest, with reading and with listening, I never had a problem. It's always been 9. Whereas with speaking, like the first time I went in, like it's progressed from like 8.5 to 9, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's been 9 bands for all 3.
Okay, great. So the very first time you took the examination, you scored 8.5 in speaking?
Yes, I did actually.
Wow, that's great. The first time that you took the exam, how long had you lived in Australia at that point?
About 3 years.
3 years, okay. And then you took the examination for the first time.
Yeah, when I took it, 'cause I just wanted to get it over and done with, and
Right.
I'm not worried about it later.
So that's my first question then. So what was the reason? Why did you take the IELTS examination? Was it for immigration purposes?
Yes, it was for immigration purposes because I'm about to apply for my permanent resident visa, and that is the reason I needed to get my 8 bands in order to fulfill the point criteria for immigration.
Okay. Now, when you speak, it's very interesting. You have an Australian accent. You have a really noticeable Australian accent, and often that's something that sometimes students that are studying English, and it's a second language, they often don't develop the accent, the regional accent that they come from. They have a bit of an accent, related to whatever country they came from. I mean, why do you think that you have the Australian accent?
I guess that's because most of my mates are Australians and they all talk like this. And
Okay.
I came here at a young age. Like I wasn't really like I was a teenager when I came here. So
Yeah.
when you're younger and you come here,
Yeah.
and you're talking to people who talk in a certain way, you just pick it up, and that just becomes natural for you.
Okay.
So I guess that's part of the reason because I do get asked this question a lot of times, even by Australians, because a lot of times they just assume I'm Australian myself, and
Yeah.
when I talk to them, they're like, "Are you serious?" And even on IELTS speaking test, I've been asked this every time I've given an IELTS speaking test about like, "You sound really Australian. Why are you giving the IELTS test?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm not."
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's very funny. You were in Australia when you were at an impressionable age, and you sort of just picked it up from the people that you were hanging around.
Yep.
Yeah, Vidit, so did you grow up in a household that spoke English?
No, I did not, as a matter of fact. The thing is, I did learn English from a very young age,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the language that I'd communicate to like people, my family in. English is my second language. But so yes, I was very comfortable with it even while I was in India because people in India do tend to speak in English, and even in high school, like I've always studied in English. But it wasn't the language of my day-to-day communication with everyone around me.
Right.
Yes, some friends, yes, because they were more comfortable in English, but other than that, at home, not so much.
Okay, interesting. So at what age did you start really focusing on your studies in English? I know that I think most places in India,
Um,
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but people study English, right from their kindergarten years, their very
Yes,
early years.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
That's right, Ryan. Because in India, how it works out is like you actually study English before you study your own mother tongue.
Oh,
So,
okay.
um, yeah. So like to me, English is not really a foreign language, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I've always, it's nothing that I had to learn per se. I've always been comfortable with it, but like here, after getting to Australia, that just like increased drastically, exponentially, actually.
Okay. Vidit, can you just state very clearly the very first time you took the examination, what were the 4 marks that you received?
The first time I took the examination, from the best of my memory, I received It was 9, 9, 8.5, 7.5
Okay, so that would mean that your writing was 7.5. The 8.5 was,
for my speaking.
so speaking was 8 point. Oh, right, speaking 8.5 and writing was 7.5. Now the most recent time that you've taken the examination, it was the 999 and 7.5, right?
No, it was 6.5 as a matter of fact because
Okay,
I didn't practice my academic writing.
okay,
So yeah, I would just like
okay.
so it was a so yeah.
Okay, okay. So let's start talking then a bit about, how you prepared for the examination. What online resources helped you prepare?
As a matter of fact, I did like not really for speaking, listening, or reading, to be honest with you, but writing has been something, like I was pretty aware of the fact that because I'm not used to writing essays, being an engineer myself,
Yeah.
so writing is something that I knew that like you need some work in, but I did not put as much work in it. But I did end up consulting your blog at one point in time, and the Ielts blog, because and it was more about me reading through those sample essays and trying to gauge what they expect out of me.
Yeah.
Because it's not about like me not being able to write an essay, but I just wanted to make sure that I emulate whatever I think of in a certain way so that I don't go off tangent or I give a response that is expected out of me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you had contacted me after listening to last week's IELTS cast episode, and that was the exact problem that Nancy was having from last week. Was that it's you kind of controlling the topic is sometimes an issue for native English speakers, and being sure that you're kind of focused and delivering what the examiner wants from you. Did you use
Yep.
any
Tend
books
to
to?
go.
Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, nothing. I was just saying we tend to go off tangent because, like, a lot of times, you just write what comes naturally to you and you don't think a lot about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the problems that you do tend to have if you're too comfortable with English as a language.
Right. Yeah. Did you use any books to prepare?
You have those official Cambridge examination papers.
Yep.
And like I think I used book number 7 and 8 from what I remember. Actually, I did actually.
Yep.
So all I did was just practice a couple of reading passages, just to get like my comprehension skills down. Because if I hadn't worked them in long, you just need to be up to date with it and make sure that your skills are right. And then listening, I think I did one passage, and I was pretty satisfied with what I did. I was more than happy, and I was confident going into the exam that I'd be all right.
Uh-huh.
So I did practice essay, model exam papers because I think that's the best way to prepare for it.
Okay, great. So I just want to just state again then the resources that you mentioned. So you looked at a couple of blogs online. So you mentioned that you'd seen my blog, you saw IELTS blog, and then you used those Cambridge sorry, they're not mock tests. They're the former testing books.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
purple here. I don't know. They're probably purple where you are as well. But I think
Yeah,
everybody knows
yeah.
what we're talking about. I don't know how many there are now, but you can buy them pretty much everywhere if you go to any foreign bookstore in most countries. You can get them there. And so you say that these were pretty central to your study strategy.
Oh well, yes, because at the end of the day, I wasn't like I did not go into extensive preparation or any kind of coaching classes, so I needed to know how the exam works and everything. So this was one of the things that like I could just because they give you answers as well,
Yeah.
so it's really easy to like look at the question, solve the whole thing,
Hmm.
and then see how you're faring. I was pretty confident after doing this, going into the exam. To be honest with you.
Okay, great. Yeah. And actually, you're not the first person to say that to me. A few other people that I had talked to said that just doing particularly the reading and the listening, you can get that down to, band 8.59 just by doing practices again and again and again until you finally get the mark that you need. So that sounds like the strategy that you followed as well.
Yep, I did actually, because because it's a lot about because a lot of people do have the comprehension skills to do reading well, and
Yep.
they also do have they can actually understand and comprehend the listening part as well. It's
Yep.
more about just getting the strategies right, and not so much about the English, like how good are they at English. So I guess practicing it really helps quite a bit.
Okay, great. Yeah. Now, I want to be sure that I'm asking the questions that the students listening want me to ask, because there were a number of people that suggested things. You know, everybody's interested in guys like you, guys that have been into the IELTS examination and actually have scored band 9. So I just want to hit everything properly. So I'm just going to go slowly through these. My next question for you was, so you scored band 9 in speaking. Now, can you describe, and please try to be as specific as you can, what did you do to prepare? Now, you have an advantage over a lot of students that are say they're still in India or they're still in China or they don't have access to speaking partners. So, you know, what in your experience, what did you have to do to prepare for this portion of the exam?
Like with the speaking test, the thing is that a lot of times, because you cannot overnight, you cannot improve how you talk in English, and that is not something that anybody would be capable of.
Right.
So my first suggestion to a lot of non-native speakers would be, because I have dealt with them back in India as well.
Yep.
A lot of times they are okay with writing, and they're okay with English in theory, but what they're not okay with is actually speaking in English. So my suggestion would be, it's okay if you get it wrong. It's okay if you can't get it right. Just try and talk and try and see that if you're saying it correctly. That would be my first suggestion. But other than that, I'd say a lot of times, even going in as a sort of native speaker in there, I like with English, like you can talk right, but if you don't paraphrase what you're talking, and if you're not like if you go off the tangent, you will lose marks in there. Because at the end of the day, what they're looking for is someone who is comfortable with English, but is also concise and can deliver the point across.
Okay, great.
Without using too many words,
Excellent point. Excellent point. Can I just though highlight one thing? So now you said someone who can summarize or can be concise. I mean, when you say that, do you mean someone who can talk generally about a subject, but then at the end of that, they kind of summarize everything in one short sentence to kind of pinpoint the answer to the examiner's question?
Yeah, I have always done that. Actually, because this was a tip that was given to me by an IELTS examiner, like not even an examiner, but like somebody who's been associated with IELTS for a long time.
Okay.
And because she herself was like, I think I was having a chat with her about it, because I was pretty unfamiliar with the test itself. And she was like, look, that's what I did with my IELTS exam when I gave it. And it's a good strategy to go in with, especially with the monologue.
Yep.
At the end of it, summarizing what you've said sort of ensures that it's sort of it gives a wholesome picture of like the answer that you're giving. So and like with speaking, like I'd be honest, like the thing about that is that you have to sort of make sure that the 1 minute you have, you utilize it properly. You go in there, you write down the points, concise points that you're going to talk about and you're going to touch, so that while you're talking, you go in a logical sequence and you don't go off the tangent, because it's very important to stick to the point.
Right. Okay. Can you suggest something that a student could do so that their accent sounds like your accent? Now, I know that you said, you have a lot of Aussie friends and you guys hang out and you can kind of emulate the way that they talk and the slang that they use. And I mean, not that you want to use slang in your examination, but just the colloquialisms that they employ. So can you suggest some way that a student that didn't have that sort of background could kind of develop their accent similar to yours?
Jeez.
It's a hard question, I know, but just give it a shot.
But like, Ryan, I'd be honest with you. Like I've known people like with like, you can have any accent you like as long as you talk clearly. It doesn't matter. Like It really doesn't, because they're not going to care about what accent you're talking in. This just happened to me because I happen to live in Australia.
Okay.
But like in all honesty, even if you have like a non-native English speaking accent, as long as you talk in a proper manner, because they don't really care. Like yes, you don't. They just need to be able to understand you, and that is all that matters. And also, like it's a hard question to answer, but like if you do, like you can watch English movies and you would know what's the right way of pronouncing it. Like not necessarily Australian, but there are a lot of American movies out there, and I'm sure they watch a lot of English out there. And if you're not sure about how to pronounce things, just watch those movies or, look online. Like there are a lot of resources if you're not sure how to pronounce things.
Yeah.
And that's the right way of doing it, because like it's not easy to pick up an accent unless you're living in the country and, and it's not something that you can do consciously, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So like you can't consciously pick up an accent and be like, I want to sound Australian from now on. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But like what you could do is make sure your pronunciation is right, because that's what matters in an IELTS exam. It's not about how, like, as long as they can understand you. Because, like, you know what? As a Canadian, you say oot, and or some Canadian people do.
Yep.
I'm not sure if you do, but like, Americans say out. I guess we say out. Like it's still, the examiner is still able to know. Like the examiner can still tell what you're talking about. So it doesn't matter how you're putting it down, as long as you pronounce it in a way that is like, they can hear it and they can understand it. That's all that matters, mate.
Okay, all right. Very good points there. Now, let's talk about the cue card section of the speaking examination. So you had mentioned before that you kind of talk perhaps sort of broadly about topics, maybe give little specific details, but you always make a point of having one sentence somewhere in there that answers the question directly. Now, I'm just looking at, IELTSblog.com, Simone's work. She's got a great website. She's always updating everybody on what the latest questions were. The latest question that came in France. The cue card says, describe a situation where you had to be polite. That's what the cue card said. Describe a situation where you had to be polite. Now, Vida, do you mind just maybe describing what strategy would you follow to answer that question? Because you've scored band 9 in speaking a couple of times. So whatever strategy you're following, that's the way to do it. So if your cue card said, describe a situation where you had to be polite, how would you structure your response?
Well, for me personally, first of all, I would take that 1 minute very seriously
Right.
that I'm given, and I would try and take full advantage of it. What I would do is I would write down. First of all, I have to think of a situation where I had to be polite, and in my head that would be probably sometime when someone was rude to me or inappropriate to me, but at that time I still had to be polite to them because of certain reason.
Okay.
So that's how my thought process works, right? So probably I would tell, like, and a lot of times in an IELTS exam, I'll be honest, Ryan, sometimes you really haven't encountered the situations. I'm guilty of actually making one up, because at the end of the day, what the examiner cares about is how you're going to express yourself and how you're going to talk in English. You don't have to have had the experience per se.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Because they don't care if you're just making stuff up at the end of it. They just want to see how well you can express yourself in English as a language.
Yes.
And even if I haven't had that situation, I'd sort of make a good one up. I'd make a situation. For example, I was in there for an assessment center as a part of my job interview, and there was this one person who I happened to interact with, and that person was being arrogant and was not being because I happened to chat with them and they were being arrogant, and I wasn't sure if they were realizing it. But at the same time, I did not want me to come across as an arrogant person. So rather than sort of being flaky and arrogant towards them, I tried to be polite and tried to answer all their questions and, be polite to them and have a nice conversation. And that was looked positively upon by the recruiters. So something on those lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, and you know what I like about your response is that you don't make it simple. You sort of complicate it a bit, because instead of just saying, a situation when I had to be polite, oh, this one time I was in a fancy restaurant and I had to say things nicely to the people around me, but you turn it around and you say, okay, well, there was this one time that somebody was not polite to me, but I was in a situation where I still had to be polite to them, which sort of adds a dynamic to your answer a little bit. I think that the examiners probably appreciate that, and that also gives you a little bit of a push to provide an answer that's not overly simple, that's a little bit more complicated in nature, and I'm sure when the examiners see that, they can tell that, okay, well, this guy, he's talking about a situation, it's not extremely simple, he's using maybe more complex grammatical structures, and I'm sure that helped them in their decision to score you 9.
I guess so, because at the end of the day, the reason I think I make it complicated is because I am supposed to talk about it for 2 minutes.
Very good
It's not
point.
an easy
Yeah,
task.
very good point. Very good point. And I think a lot of students, you'd probably agree with me, is they don't set themselves up for something that they can keep talking about. They answer the cue card and say 1 or 2 sentences, and then they're sort of, there's nowhere for them to go. But that's a good point. That if you try to create those those little bridges for that'll maybe make you have to talk for a little bit longer. It will help you.
It sure does, and a lot of times you can pick up experiences, and like you can just sort of because you're going to talk about it for 2 minutes, and my problem is I talk a bit faster than I actually should,
Yeah.
and I'm aware of that, so I know that I will have to inevitably provide more content because a lot of times in these situations you can't like sort of it's a stress situation, and you can't like sort of monitor how fast. Like you can try and talk a bit slowly, but that's not how I'm comfortable with. I just talk a bit faster than usually people do, so I have to put in more content than usual because I want the whole 2 minutes to last, and I don't want to sit around there looking as if I'm not sure what I'm talking about. So yes, I do, and there've been a couple of instances where like 10 minutes before I was aware that I've spoken for a long time, I did stop because I did not want to give an impression that I'm just going off the tangent and talking endlessly.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I give a whole rounded response. There have been a couple of instances did end up talking like about a minute and like 45 seconds, and the examiners understand that, and more often than not, they just move along.
Okay, great. Now, when you made notes in that 1 minute to answer your cue card question, so what do your notes look like? Because I think sometimes students, they're curious to know. I mean, what would a Band 9 student write in their little paper when they're preparing? So what does your paper look like when you finish writing your notes?
It's just words, Ryan. They're
Yep.
just words. Like, it's actually a sequence of words. Key words that will help me sort of structure the sentence. Because a lot of times the problem is not that I'm unable to express myself. It's just that I'm unable to think of content to talk about in order to express myself. So a lot of it has to do with, like, for example, if I'm giving a situation, I'm going to give like an introduction word and then like something in the middle and then there and like keep on moving like, with like words. It's not sentences. It's not like full-fledged sentences or anything like that. All I put down is words so that while I'm looking at it, I know what I'm talking about and I can go in a logical sequence.
That is a very good point. Yeah. So your advice would be for students not to write full sentences or little phrases. It's more just pinpoint the key words that you need to talk about.
Yeah, like if it's a phrase of a couple of words, that's a good thing. Write it down. But at the end of it all, you have only 1 minute, and you're going to make sure you have to decide that, like, how you're going to structure the whole next 2 minutes in that 1 minute, and it's not an easy task. So you've got to be very fast, and and you've got to make sure that because you have to think of an answer, you have to think of a few expressions they're going to put in there, and you've got to write that down at the same time in 1 minute about what you're going to talk in 2 minutes. So you've got to be really fast with that. So you can't write down sentences. I wish I could.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Good advice. Next question. Can you please describe the speaking experience that you had? So, where was your examiner from? How did you feel?
I have had a British examiner, an Australian examiner, and an Indian examiner.
Wow.
So, it's been pretty varied. A lot of times, how it works with me is I try and make a rapport with the examiner before going in there because, when they come to call you out and you're sitting there. And, I don't know, I think it's more of an Australian thing. In India, I'm not sure how it works, but it's more of an Australian thing that, you try and make a rapport, and a lot of times you just go, like I said, they always ask me, you sound Australian, what's up with that? And, you start from there, and, a lot of times, because it's good, because going in there, the examiner can already tell you that you're a good speaker.
Yep.
He's looking at you positively,
Yep.
and it's a good start to the whole experience, because at the end of it, you're going to have a cross conversation with them, so try and make it more like a conversation rather than a one-way street, like that the examiner's asking you questions and you're not sort of answering them, or it's not an interview, it's actually a conversation that you need to have, and the more of it, the more of that you can put down, the better.
Okay, very good advice. Okay. Now let's go on to the listening and reading sections, and you scored Band 9 in both of those. And now we've already talked about a few of the ways that you prepared for these sections, but is there anything else that you would like to share about them, about particularly how you prepared?
Look, like I said before, it's more about practice. But the thing with reading that I notice a lot of times people do is that, we are ingrained to read the whole passage and then go and try and answer the questions, which I believe is the wrong way to approach it. You know what? Because that's how even I was trained. In high school, that's how you do things. You read the passage, you answer the question. That is not how it works in ours. you are short of time. What you got to do is you got to go in there with like a mindset that you're supposed to answer all 40 questions. So when you go in there, like start with the first passage, read all the questions. Because the good thing about this is it's all sequential, you know. So read the question for the first passage, then you go into the first passage, starting from the first question, because you know what you're looking for. So it's easier that way, because at the end of it, if you read the whole passage and you come back to the questions, you're not going to retain a lot of it. People can try it out if they like, you know, while practicing it, and just make sure you know what the passage is about. And other than that, you don't need to know about it. Just look for the answers and like mark the answers, number one, number two. It's all sequential. And after you finish every passage, put it down. Do not wait till the end. But do not write answer directly, like after answering every question. So wait for about 5 to 7 answers and like then write it down, so that it's sort of like you have speed. At the same time, you're putting down stuff so that by the end of it, if you are short on time, you don't lose out the whole. Like your effort doesn't go to waste totally.
Okay, and so now your strategy, actually, you're the first person that suggested this strategy to me. I'm not talking about the strategy of reading the questions first. A lot of people recommend that strategy, and I agree with you that there's no point in even trying the other strategy because you're going to run out of time. So read through the questions first, then go through the text itself and find the answers. But the strategy that I think is unique to you, that I have not heard before, is that you go through the text and you, whatever you said you do, you underline, and then you put the number of the question that's the answer for, and then at the end you transfer the answers to your answer sheet. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do that. Yes, I do that. Like at the end of it, like after I've done the paragraph and I've marked all the answers, what I do is I go back to my answer sheet, I look at the question, then I read the answer, because I want to make sure that I don't spell it wrong when I'm trying to put it down.
Right.
So then I copy directly from the comprehension, from the composition, and like, you know, and then I write it down directly, and that is how I function, because I want to make sure that I don't pen it down wrong after having found the right answer.
Okay, so you read the questions, you go through the text, you find the answers, underline them, write the numbers. At the end, then you go back and put the answers into your sheet. That's a really excellent strategy. I bet you save yourself a couple of minutes doing that.
Yes, I do. Like, no, in all honesty, Ryan, like with GT reading section, I've finished it in like half an hour. I'm being honest.
Wow, geez. So yeah, and I'm sure that strategy helps you do that as well.
Yeah, it does. It does save a lot of time, because a lot of times I'm actually just waiting there for the next thing to come. With academic, yes, like, you know, it takes full 55 minutes. Like every time I've given academic, it's taken me 55 minutes, because of course it's harder.
Yep.
It's harder to find the answers. But like good thing about academic is, I believe if you're losing out on the reading mark, you should give academic, because there's more like, you know, they give you more latitude to make errors at the end of it. So like with like, I'm sure you're aware of like how with like 34 right, you get like a band 7 in academic, but you get lesser in GT or something like that. So that's a good thing about academic, that you get more latitude. Yes, it's harder, but at the end of it, like even if you're going to make a few errors, it's going to be all right. So people who are struggling with getting their required reading mark and they're okay with other components, I think academic is the way to go for them.
Okay, sure. Sorry, the connection just breaking up a little bit, so I'm just going to summarize what you just said, though.
Yep.
So you're just saying that there is a little bit more leeway. I think most students know that if you're taking the academic examination and say you get 2 or 3 wrong, that is actually not penalized as hard as if you're writing the general and you get 2 or 3 wrong. So what Vidit is saying is that if you're taking the exam and if reading is the one section of the exam that's difficult for you, you'd be better just as part of your strategy to take the academic exam. If you don't, you know, it doesn't matter which exam that you take. The academic exam is just a little bit more lenient that way. Now, Vidit, I want to ask you, a lot of students, they complain and about the true false not given section of the examination, and you know, everybody follows a different strategy for finding those kinds of answers. But what do you do when you face that sort of those sorts of questions?
Yeah, that's the hardest section in the whole of reading exam, to be honest with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
How it works for me is you've got to know that it's all sequential. So you're not going to find, like, if you found the answer to one of those true false somewhere, you're not going to find the answer to the next question above that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how it works for me is, if it's stated specifically, it's true. If there's nothing to that respect, I'm going to write a not given.
Sorry, Vidit, do you mind just mentioning that again? Just my connection just broke up a little bit. So you said if something is true.
If they've stated specifically, like, you know, if it's given, like, you know, if there's a sentence that do not go into implications. They're not going to try and be overtly hard and imply something is true or imply something is false. They're going to just state it there.
Right.
Because that's why, like, I think I remember, like, one time, like, where I was a bit confused because, sometimes you use your overactive imagination and you try and see, oh, probably they're trying to imply that. They're not trying to imply anything. All they want you to see is, like, read the paragraph. If it is given, it's true. If it is given that it's false, they're going to write the other way around. And if nothing is given about it, it's not given. Chances are it's not false, it's not given.
Okay, great. So, and I guess the part that kind of messes people up in that section is that often the vocabulary does not match the vocabulary in the question. Do you know what I mean? So, like, they'll ask a question, such and such, and then the true false not given, and then when you're looking through the text itself, it might be true, but it's just worded differently. I mean, do you ever find that that's part of the challenge for you? Or?
I haven't, like, I'll be honest with you, like, I haven't come across a lot of vocabulary in the reading test that I have struggled with.
Yep.
Like, in all honesty, like, they're like the last passage, they have a little question, they're like, they use some words, but, like, even then, like, you can make up the meaning and you can, like, sort of guess what the meaning is.
Great. Now, how about we talk about the listening examination, and what sort of insight can you share regarding that section?
Listening is a bit tricky in the sense how I work at listening is that before I start, like, the test, like, every time they give you time to read the next questions, and a lot of times when they tell you to check the previous questions, I'm actually reading the next passage or the next section, and I'm underlining the key words, because when it comes back to it, how it works in my head is that, like, when I come back to it, like, I just want to be able to read the word and tell what the question is, sort of.
Yeah.
And what I'm trying to answer, because it's sequential, right? That's okay. But a lot of times, I'm not a very multitasking person, so it's really hard for me to, like, be listening at the same time and trying to answer the question at the same time. So if I can sort of ease out one of those things, that is trying to read the question and answer it. So while I'm listening it, and I already know what the question is, so I can just pen down the answer straight away. So,
okay.
Yep. So that's how sort of it works for me. Like, I just make sure I've read the questions, I underline the key points in there, and then I know what answers I'm looking for while they're talking and having that conversation.
Okay, interesting. So you say that when you're told to check whatever your answers were in the previous one, you're already focused on the next section and you're preparing for that.
I am. Because you know what, Ryan, at the end of it, they're still going to give you 10 minutes to check your previous answers and put them down on the sheet.
Yep.
And after the conversation is over, you can't really do anything about it, to be honest with you.
Right, yeah. Yeah, no, I know what
So-
you mean, because, I mean, I kind of, for the listening section, it's difficult because it plays once and then it's gone. And so, to go back and check the answers again, I mean, I guess you could check for spelling or for little tiny errors like that, I suppose. But
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, yeah.
I can.
Okay, yeah. So I like your strategy. So you basically you believe in yourself. You trust that you've gotten everything down correctly as you've gone through it, and then you just use that time to go into the next section and prepare for that.
And Ryan, even if I did not trust myself enough that I've done it correctly, there is nothing like I can go back and there is nothing I can do in that span of time that I can't do later.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Very good point.
So like if I do end up making a spelling error or anything like that I'm going to catch at that point, I'm perfectly capable of doing the same thing, like, after the end of the test.
Right, exactly. Very good point. So there's no point in trying to correct little spelling things or whatever, because you're going to have time to do it at the end anyways.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go to the next question then. So what do you think students should do if they want to score band 9 on the exam, let's say for listening? What sort of step-by-step instructions would you give? So students that are practicing for listening and they want to score the same as you, band 9. Well,
of course, I'd say practice from like the CDs that they give you with the Ielts test and everything, and try and get it right. And because the main task is getting that, because like I think the passage 1 is really easy, 2 is easy. It's hard when you've got to answer 10 questions in a row.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. And when like you've got to sort of answer questions with similar meanings or something like there's one sort of that kind of passage as well.
Yeah.
Those are the hard bits, and that's where they differentiate between like somebody who's above band 8 and somebody who's below that. Mm-hmm. So over there, like it's like I said, like if you can actually get the questions in your head and sort of just extract the answer, that's one of the things that you can do. And like as far as practicing goes, when you're practicing it, it helps you sort of sharpen your strategies and like work on what suits you specifically. So the more you do, the more practice you do, the better it is for you. The other thing that I had to talk about is being comfortable with a lot of different accents, because in the IELTS test, you're gonna have people are generally okay with English, like with like American accent or with like Canadian accents, you know,
Yep.
because a lot of the movies out there are in North American accents. I'm sure like Australian accent is a bit hard for people to comprehend sometimes because it's not very like not for native English speakers, but like a lot of people who are not from like native English, who are not native English speakers. I'm sure it's hard for them to comprehend it sometimes. Or TV accent for that matter, it's pretty hard. Like I'll be honest with you, like the only reason I get easy with that is like because I have a lot of TV friends. So like sort of just like if you're looking at that band 9, even though they're very clear, if you can just like sort of just watch a movie and see if you're comfortable with that accent and like if you're like okay with it and if you don't struggle with it, that's all that matters, because you don't want to spend time trying to decipher what people are saying, like, you know, the time that you should be spending trying to answer the questions.
Very good point. Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because I think you're right. A lot of students, when they go to study for the listening section, if they get IELTS related listening material, I'm sure they're fine because they'll hear the different accents that they need to hear. But a lot of students, when they try to go the movie route or whatever, they get a bunch of Hollywood titles, and you know, chances are they're not going to hear that accent on the examination. And you know how it is. I mean, you know, accents can make a really big difference to the ability that you're able to understand what the person is saying. So I agree with you that the student should really focus on doing practice listening tests, like proper practice listening tests, you know, from official IELTS resources, and then just try to improve that way.
Yeah, because that sort of covers a lot of different accents at the same time.
Yeah.
Because like there are not a lot of movies out there that are going to tell you about the Kiwi accent or the Australian accent, and those two accents are out there, especially if you're giving IDP tests.
Yeah, let me just
Trust me, Ryan,
clarify.
like,
Well, I think some students don't know what a Kiwi is. Do you want to explain for us what that is?
I'm sorry. It's a colloquialism from somebody who hails from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And those people talk a bit differently, and they do have a bit of a strong accent, and like it's hard to understand. Like if you live in Australia, it's not that hard, but like if you're from abroad, even Americans struggle trying to understand Kiwi people. I've seen it sometimes.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard for them. So you just got to you've got to be comfortable with it, like, you know. And because in IELTS, it's not that strong an accent. It's just that you've got to be comfortable enough to be able to focus on the answers and the questions.
Very good point. Yeah. So, there are a variety of accents that you'll hear in the examination. I'm not sure what your experience is, but I very, very rarely hear Canadian accents or American accents on the exam. It's predominantly British, of course, and Australian, South African a bit too. But I don't know about you. I very rarely hear North American accents on the exam.
Yeah, there's a token one or two North American people. Like there is, like, you know, they do have that token North American person in there in every test. But like in all honesty, it's not that very. It's because these tests are made in Australia and the UK.
Yeah.
So they have people readily available who have those accents, I guess. Like that's my best guess, you know.
Yeah.
And like I'm sure if you give TOEFL or something like that at that time, like you'd be hearing more of North American accent. But that is true because at the end of it, you're trying to immigrate to one of these countries, and
right.
You know, so it's just that they're trying to make sure you can understand people who live in the country. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. My last question for you. So what other IELTS resources do you think could be made available online for students that are not available right now? So, you know, there are lots of stuff that students can get online, but when you're studying for the examination, what would you have liked to see more of? What do you think other students would like to see more of?
Like, Ryan, I think there is like, especially with these three parts that I spoke about, there are a lot of resources out there. I guess one of the things could be, because IELTS doesn't give out like specifically people who have those 9 bands, and how they talk, like, and how the conversations go. That's not like that is one of the things that they could give out, so that people actually can gauge what the IELTS speaking examiner is looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the things that could be out there, because other than that, there are a lot of resources out there. You just got to be smart about it. You got to make the best possible use of it. And with, like, it's like writing and speaking tests, because these tests are so subjective, that like people out there are not aware of like how to go about it, because everyone has a different strategy, and you don't know which is the right one and what's expected out of you. You don't want to take any chances.
Yep.
Like, I'm glad that the blog you have about writing, like that, I'm glad you have that, because at least there is a proper structure to it. And because like earlier when I attempted my writing test, it just turned out like I just write like anything I wanted, and like there was no like, I would of course try and paraphrase it to the best of my abilities, but
Yeah.
like having that structure really helps you out to like sort of formulate a very concise response
Yeah.
that is really eloquent and everything. So I guess the resources from like people who actually understand, because if ours is not going to put it out, at least people who have scored those bands and who understand the test and who understand what's expected could put them out to help other people out to get like similar perfect bands, I guess.
Yeah, right, yeah. And the thing I like about the internet too is that, if somebody does post a strategy online, so for example, like myself, so posting a test taking strategy online, and it's open to the world, and it's open to even other people connected to IELTS. So even IELTS examiners can look at that. And I've had examiners talk to me through the internet, and they tell me the things that work well. Most of the time, I just hear the strategy's working fine. It looks good, and I think you're doing fine. Keep doing what you're doing. And once in a while, I've had an examiner email and say, well, you don't have to say it this way. A student can still score 9 if they do something else. I'll give you an example. I remember about 3 years ago, I had a video online, and as part of the comment in the video, I wrote that a student would be expected to indent their paragraphs as they go down. And then I received an email from an examiner. The examiner said to me, everything looks fine, Ryan, but even if the student does not indent those paragraphs, they will still be able to score 9, which was news to me. I didn't know that. So I think that the internet is a very powerful thing, and that if you find people that are putting resources online, chances are that they are receiving feedback from examiners themselves, and if they're professional, they'll tailor their material to kind of fit with what the examiners are saying. So I think that there are a lot of really powerful resources that students can tap into. But for just though, as far as the listening goes, did you use an online resource that you can name, like the BBC podcast that they put out, or can you just tell us maybe one specific website that you used?
I actually did not use any website, because unfortunately I just didn't use anything, because I just had those. Like I said, like the IELTS official prep exam thing.
Yeah.
So I just put in the CD in my computer, and I made sure I had no distractions, and I just did the test by myself, and I made sure I could do it right, and I was more than happy with my performance on that practice mock test. So I didn't really have to go out of my way to look for resources online, I guess.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Vidit, you've scored 3 band 9s. I think you are a model student and a very charming guy. Thank you very much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Ryan. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for downloading from ielts.com. Have you achieved an overall band of 7 or higher on the IELTS exam? Why not contribute to the podcast? Contact Ryan at his blog, ielts.com. And don't forget to rate this podcast on iTunes.
IELTS Cast, episode 18.
You're listening to IELTS Cast, the podcast that puts you in touch with successful IELTS candidates from around the world. Listen and learn as they explain how they achieved band 7, 8 and even 9. Now, here's your host, Ryan.
Hello and welcome to IELTS Cast. My name is Ryan, and today I'm speaking with Toby, an IELTS candidate from Uzbekistan. Toby recently took his IELTS and scored an overall band of 8. He took his exam in Tashkent, which is the capital of Uzbekistan, and he scored a perfect 9 in reading, an 8.5 in listening and in speaking, and a 6.5 in writing. And so that all that together gave him the overall of 8, and a very amazing score. So hello, Toby. Welcome to IELTS Cast.
Hello, very nice to meet you one more time.
Yeah, we've been, as we were talking before, we've been trying to get in touch for several times now. I think it's been about 2 weeks.
Yes, sure, it is.
Yeah, and we finally were able to do it this evening. So, Toby, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background? Why are you taking the exam? And just tell us a bit about your relationship with the IELTS.
Actually, in our country, that's a very trend to learn English or other languages.
Okay.
So I've been learning English for 5 years consecutively,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and just to test how well was it going, I was going to take IELTS in summer, so I did, and it happened out that it's okay now. So I'm already preparing for the university. I'm just 17 years old.
And was that the first time you took the exam?
Yeah, that's the very first time, man.
Oh wow! So those are amazing marks for a guy that took it for only one time. So now you said that you studied for 5 years. Now I guess that means that you started when you were 12 years old.
Generally, yes, but hard preparation started like in 2010 when I was about 14.
Did you
Huh?
know at the age of 14 you were going to take the IELTS?
No, I wasn't actually planning that so much, but that happened out that I have to take for my university.
Now, let's get to the exam itself. So now you've had 5 years of formal education in the English language. Your first attempt,
Yes.
you have these amazing marks on the IELTS. I know lots of students are listening, and they want to know exactly what you did to first of all score. Let's start with maybe talking about the reading portion of the exam. You scored a perfect band 9. So tell us a little bit about how you prepared for this section of the exam and what you think you did specifically that led to a perfect score.
First, if we start talking about reading especially, I wasn't much concerned about it. Because first, I found out on many sites of yours and of Simon that there is no special secret in the preparation process for IELTS.
Right.
So then I came with the simple logic that if I want to improve my reading, so that I need to read a lot. So then what I started doing was getting the things I'm interested in, especially in the English language, for example, the sphere of technology, and loading myself with the materials in in English every day, about 10, 50 pages. That was a usual load I was doing every day.
So,
And
sorry, let's just amplify that. So you were reading between 10 and 50 pages about a topic that you're very interested in every single day.
yes, sure, that was my key point now.
Wow. Okay.
Then some more things that I like to specialize were that I started practicing my speed reading skills, like Tony Buzan.
Okay. Can you just share that name again?
Tony Buzan, speed reading.
Okay.
And out of that, I was starting to be interested in the analytical reading in this sphere. So I came up with this book and another book also called something like How to Read a Book.
Okay.
So then out of this, I made a conclusion that while or before reading anything, we need to ask the questions which we want to get answered while reading the thing. So this was my starting point when I started analyzing, and then I came up with simple logic that I should read just more what I'm interested in so that I improve my reading. That was the key point only.
Well, now regarding strategy, though, did you go through the questions first and then go to the text, or were you speed reading through the text and then going to the questions?
That was very simple because the last time I had a week to prepare, so I started being more intense. So I downloaded one of the recordings from your site. I don't especially remember the name, but there was an Indian guy who scored generally 8.5, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was Vidit, if I recall correctly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, the very one.
Yeah.
And then from him, I also got some points. Like I started doing only one question per time, and my strategy was just like him. First and second passages, I was just going through the questions first, 1 second, and going to the top to the passage and finding the answers. And when I was coming up with the third one, I already have 30 minutes left to deal with that.
Oh, wonderful.
So I was pretty okay, and I spent only 15 minutes on the third one. I was more concentrating on reading the text first. because that's usually considered that the third passage is the hardest one. So I was concentrating more on detail so that I don't score any bad things in the last one.
Wow, terrific. And if I recall correctly, I think Vidit had the same experience where he was able to get through the first two passages before even half, like you said, before even half of the time had passed. That's
Yes.
yeah. So can I just clarify then the strategy? You read one question and went and found the answer, and then you read the next question and went and found the
Yes.
answer. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
And what,
simple
what,
formula.
what question type are we talking about? Are you talking about all question types, or the true, false, not given, or paragraph headings, or?
No, like all the ones except of the headings,
Okay.
because I was leaving them to to the end as it was advised by Vidit also. That's really logical when you have already the general understanding of the passage. You can easily like match them all.
Okay.
So this
Terrific.
was a strategy.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Now let's amplify that a bit too, because so
Huh?
basically, if you have a question that asks you to find headings or to label headings for each of the paragraphs, you leave that question type to the end, because the other question
Yes.
types will force you to go through the text, and then you'll have a better understanding of what's within the text, and then the heading labels will come much easier.
Certainly, certainly.
Okay, let's move on to the listening portion of the IELTS. So you scored 8.5, which
Yeah.
is also an extremely excellent mark. Now, can you tell us, in the same way that you've talked about the reading, what your strategies were there for preparing for this exam?
For prayer, and it was the same as like finding the things you like to listen about and just listen them as much as possible, because we don't actually, of the foreigners, don't have the possibility to be among the English speaking community.
Yep.
So that's why I was really like spending much time on listening to the real English. So something interesting can be made, like I was listening to movies. I was converting them into the MP3 so that I'm not distracted by the picture itself.
Good idea. That's a
So
really good
then
tip.
I was just listening it at any time I had.
Okay, so you were just throwing on your headphones when you're on the subway or the train and listening to the audio that came from movies that you enjoy.
Yes. And
Okay.
also songs are a great help in this. For example, Eminem, like for us, that's, a very big topic here, because his English is considered here as the top one.
Yep.
His speed, his pronunciation. So trying to imitate him was my hobby, let's say. I was concerned about this thing for about like 3 months, so that I managed my speed well in English.
Yeah, when people sing, they do tend to enunciate words much stronger than people do when they're just simply speaking.
Yeah, that's the very point I'm trying to make right here.
Yeah. So, okay, that's a very interesting strategy as well. Now, it sounds like you had some very different strategies when you were approaching this exam. I've never heard of anybody ripping the audio off of a movie and listening to it, but I think that's a really excellent approach. So for listening, then you're basically focusing on listening every day. Now, how much English listening did you do every day?
It was about 2 hours a day.
And was this all while you were, say, going to school and coming home, the majority, or?
The passive listening was about 1 hour, but the thing I'm telling about 2 hours, there was active listening. So what I mean here is taking notes,
Yep.
analyzing the speech, the flow,
Yep.
as you're saying, pronunciation.
Yep.
So this was in general 3 hours of passive and active listening.
Okay, every day. Wow. And this course of study went on for how long?
About 50 days.
Okay, so roughly 2 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Toby, I think that what we're talking about now leads me directly into my next question for you, which is, now that I've heard you speak, you have a very, very good accent. And I think a lot of people, you know what, I bet you and Vidit must have followed the same sort of strategies when you were preparing, because I remember commenting to Vidit as well. He had a very clear accent, and you do too. And I wonder if this is, because you have been listening so actively and trying to reproduce the sounds that you hear in the language.
Yes, that's the thing. And I want to add that I'm an active debater too.
Yep.
So I like to work on my speaking skills, like pronunciation, the way I manage my vocabulary. So that was the point. Like I was considering IELTS as a game, and I divided everything like reading, speaking, listening, writing into parts, and I created some activities which I like to do to improve my language.
Okay.
So that's the way I done, both in speaking and in other sections.
Wonderful.
Huh?
Now, can you elaborate on the speaking practice that you did while you were in Uzbekistan, while you were in Tashkent?
Oh, actually, I didn't have any access to native speakers, but I was practicing with the guys who were also about my age
Yep.
and my level, but more of like advanced level speakers. We're gathering like every day almost, and we're just making some kind of activity which I created for myself. It's called marathon.
Okay, tell us about marathon. I got to know this.
It's like imagine that there are 3 people sitting in a room. So then for the first one, we put a topic like the easiest one. Let's say, how do you feel today? And they should be like making an interesting talk about it for 1 minute, each of them. And then it goes like the circle ends, and they give each other feedback. And it goes to 1 minute, 3 minutes, 7 minutes, and 10 minutes of circles.
Wow, okay. That is really a marathon.
So this way I was like preparing each day. That's how I got 8.5, if to be direct.
Wow, that's amazing. So you and your 2 friends, you were doing this on a daily basis. You were pushing each other to speak at length.
Yes.
So now let me get the strategy correct. So you guys, you each talk about a topic for 1 minute in a circle. Then who decides the next topic?
For example, you're sitting here and I have some friend of mine here. So we both who are not active, who are not going to speak, are giving just with negotiation the next topic. So that's like more of negotiation rather.
Each one of you talks about the same topic for 1 minute, or you give a different topic to each person?
Yeah, the second one, like we give different topics to each one.
I see, okay. And then when you finish the circle, you bump it up to 3 minutes, you give each other a new topic. When you finish that circle, you bump it up to 7, give each other a new topic, and up like that.
Yeah, but between there are like advice givings, for example, about grammar or about relaxation while speaking, feedbacks.
As far as the speaking exam goes, describe the whole experience that you had. Where was the examiner from? How did you feel? What sort of questions were you asked?
About the examiner, I think she was British because her name was
Okay.
But about the exam, like the questions were more about the language and language learning. So we started from the question like, why are you learning English? Why do you need it? The first part. And I don't clearly recall the other questions in the first part, but on the second there was a definite topic about any language you'd like to learn except of English.
Okay.
So then there were the questions. While the 1 minute preparation time, I was more of preparing about vocabulary rather than any ideas. Topic words which were advised by both on your side and on the Simon's side.
Wonderful. Okay, great.
So later on the third part, I hadn't any problem because I was really like trained to this. So I was just speaking, and I don't really clearly recall what I was talking about now.
Okay, and at that point it was sort of a free conversation with the examiner, I imagine.
So that's the thing I'd like to tell about speaking, because I don't have any really, specific things to tell about this.
Well, yeah, but I think that the exam that you've just described, it sounds like nothing particularly special happened during that exam, but it does sound like all of this preparation you did with your marathon training and with all the listening that you've done, that is really what the keys were to allowing you to engage the exam at an 8.5 level. Now, what do you think though held you back from 9? Is there anything that happened during the exam that you feel, well, that's probably where I lost marks?
That's in speaking, you mean?
Yeah.
In speaking, I probably am thinking that that's about more of concrete knowledge or like concrete examples. Because at my age, I was not really, let's say, more like all burdened. I wasn't prepared from like, how to say, from adult point of view. Because I was really childishly speaking, more of simple things, like understandable to anybody. So probably that what I was lacking, because I didn't seem to be an academic guy. So to be like from with it, as we just stated, I understood that to be a professional in any sphere and learning that sphere in English language, that's the very point for IELTS. So I was not a specialist in any sphere, so probably that was my key weak point in IELTS speaking.
When you were giving your response, do you remember using particular points of cohesion to create linking between your sentences?
Oh, I don't remember from which source, but I got some tips saying be direct, as direct as possible. Using transitions when only needed, but not to start or to connect some paragraphs.
Right.
And I was really using them rarely, but precisely, as I guess.
And I can tell, I mean, just in this conversation that we've had now, that you do use them effortlessly. You don't really have to think about it; they just come to you.
Yep. Yeah, because you know, if like how much we speak English, that becomes as easier.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now let's move on to the writing portion of the examination. So you got 6.5, which is a respectable mark. What were you doing in preparation for this examination, and how did you engage the exam itself?
About writing, I now only see my mistake that I didn't give my papers to be checked to any teacher before going to IELTS exam.
So you think it's probably grammar that held you back?
Nope, that was really just the point where which just led me back was in the process of taking IELTS in this classroom was I was really writing not speedily enough, not fast enough. I was having great ideas, great vocabulary, but the thing was I was mad at myself saying that I'm writing too slow there. So this would be the tip I would like to give to anybody who's going to take IELTS. Just work on your speech writing because that can be the problem. You will have great ideas, great vocabulary, great structure, every understanding, but if you cannot describe and put those thoughts onto the paper, that's worth nothing.
Right. So were you training though under exam-like conditions before you went into the exam?
Oh, actually, no. For writing, I didn't have any time for that. I'm sure that I can score 8.5 or 8 in writing, but
Yep.
The thing is the writing process, it's speed.
Right. Okay. So your tip to students listening is then to train for speed.
Yeah, at the end, if you have like good structure, good vocabulary.
So Toby, now we're coming to the end of the interview. What would you like to share to anybody listening who comes from Uzbekistan, comes from China, comes from a little town in India where they don't have access to native English teachers or even access to other students at a high level? These are students that want to score like you. They want to score band 8. What should they be doing?
First, don't prepare for IELTS as a test. This is not actually a test, but more of like a game. For me, it was actually. And do it the way you like, not the way I advise, the way somebody else advised. Because the only way that's the best will be working for anybody, for any candidate who's now listening to us, is the way he created for himself, the personal one. So just try, experiment, use any techniques, and combine them so that you find your key secret for yourself. This is the tip, the only one I could give to anybody.
It's a wonderful tip, Toby. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you too, Ryan.
Thank you for downloading from ielts.com. Have you achieved an overall band of 7 or higher on the IELTS exam? Why not contribute to the podcast? Contact Ryan at his blog, ielts.com.